And I think a lot of people have had this mislead that if I can think something, I know something. But at a certain point, your nervous system knows that stuff. And to think is a shallow ghost of the actual knowledge.
When you believe you have wisdom, you have to skirt the line between confidence in yourself and humbleness that you still have more to learn.
So much of what is beneficial in the coaching is the relationship. It's not even the exchange of information. It's the relationship itself.
You're essentially being told that this is the quote unquote right way to do something. And you have to trust that the person that is giving you that information actually knows what they're talking about.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Seeking Balance podcast. This week we have Dylan Weisman. Dylan Weisman is a high-stakes PLO player. He's played at Triton and many other high-stakes events. He also runs a performance coaching business, much like my own. Dylan focuses mostly on systems and how to improve the systems in your life, and he works with people in business and in poker. Dylan is a very vulnerable human being. This was my first time talking to him, but I really appreciated just his honesty and openness and the kind of conversations we were able to have because of that. I think there's a lot of great nuggets of insight here, and I hope you all enjoy it. And now I bring you Dylan Weisman. Dylan, thank you so much for doing this, man. I'm excited to talk to you. We have extremely similar journeys and careers. We both play poker and then moved into mental game coaching or performance coaching. To my knowledge, you work a lot more on the business side of things, though. Is that right? Like you work, yeah.
I do both. I'd say that my clients are relatively evenly split between poker. And when I say poker, it means most of my work nowadays is actually like for high stakes cash games. So lots of people that are playing in the big private stuff because those games are all nuanced and require special sims and special tools, things like that. But there are also a lot of people who aren't professional poker players. And so my client base at this point tends to be like is not as many professionals, at least for my personal work. I have coaches who coach under me, and they tend to do more of the work with the people that are like in the weeds grinding poker and things like that. But I still have a couple, professional poker clients. I still have some like high stakes tournament clients. I don't coach as many of those nowadays because I made my friends too good at poker, and now they all play against me. And so which is great because I get to have friends to hang out with and talk with. But the conflict of interest started to become inefficient for that particular product offering. And so I've had to kind of retweak that. And I think in 2026, I'll have some new things that'll maybe make it a little more efficient for me to do, but backed off on that one. And then, yeah, a lot of my clients are no longer in poker. Some are professional poker players who are trying to transition out of poker into being able to execute well as like in the professional world, essentially, because it's very easy for people who are neurodivergent and smart to make money at poker, but it is not as easy for them to transition those same aptitudes out of poker, at least from my experience.
Is that a big part of your clientele then, like the neurodivergent? Is that something you work commonly with?
Yeah. Like sees like, right? And so I'm very hard ADHD with some autism sprinkles in there. And so I think that a lot of the people that are attracted to me generally are people who have brains that function either somewhat similar or they can feel as if I can empathize with their thought process. One of my favorite things I learned a couple of years ago, my wife, late in her life, was diagnosed with ADHD. And her psychiatrist told us that one of the key diagnostic criteria was how many of your friends are neurodivergent. And that's actually what they use.
Fascinating.
But it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you surround yourself with people whose brains are similar to yours, so you don't have to be explaining yourself as much. And so I think that tends to happen a lot with my client base, is where you get people there, and that doesn't mean that they're like hard nerd or it's all a spectrum, right? But I would say that I do tend to have more of a specialty into neurodivergent clients, specifically because the tools and lessons that I've learned for myself are very strongly applicable to what they're dealing with. Because as I said, for a lot of them, the problem solving is easy. It's like brains are badass and they can really work through problems and effectively diagnose how to like break it down step by step. But then the process of like managing a team or the process of managing your relationship with your partner while scaling a business, or the process of doing those two things while also still trying to play poker. That's very not trivial. And it's what a lot of my work has been on, I'd say, in the last 4 years personally. So those let's say hard earned lessons are the ones that my clients in my current iteration tend to be resonating the most with, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I can see that for sure. I mean, especially if depending on the neurodivergence, but there's I think the problems you're describing, I think, are could seem easier to handle too before until you're in them. Like with a particular kind, like you could be like, well, I would just do this, 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 but then you're in it and like the felt reality and how the degree to which they all overlap. This is like a linear versus parallel problem solving thing. But I think neurodivergent people tend to think very linearly in terms of their problem solving, so they can take on too much, thinking it will be easy to prosecute those things. But yeah, it can be more complicated than that.
I actually really like that vocabulary, the linear problem solving. And unfortunately, the issue becomes, and this I think is true for a lot of founders. What I've come to find is that in terms of the hierarchy of needs, it always feels easiest to put work at the top, because especially when it comes to like cultural programming, or when it comes to what drives a lot of very successful founders, work coming first is just like the base operating principle. And what tends to be the case is that you get a lot of early feedback for that being correct. Like the regression analysis that is their brain and their body sees that if they put work first, they get a lot of like positive feedbacks. And the regressions are trained, well, not all regressions, but a lot of like logistic regressions are trained off of positive feedbacks, not the negative ones. And so if you're getting a lot of positive feedback that putting work first is quote unquote good based on the metrics that you're defining as success, you're going to keep doing that. But that what tends to happen is as you're scaling, especially if you have a family, what that will do is it breaks down your life infrastructure, because now your hierarchy of what's important is still going through that linear process of work first, but then your underlying foundation is starting to crumble because you don't have enough bandwidth going down the totem pole. And so for me personally, one big change that I've made in the last year, and I think this comes with like I got married a year ago, and a lot of my like childhood trauma was around trusting my family. And so in my current space, so much of my personal work has been how can I trust my family system more and actually give that the bandwidth first. And what I found is that when I do that, my work and professional life also does better, specifically my poker. Like if my home life feels good, I'm a crusher on the felt. My home life does not feel good. My probability of winning, I think, goes down non-trivially, honestly.
Yeah. I think people have a tendency to underrate, especially people who are high achievers, tend to underrate the brutal reality of what it means to be a human and the degree to which you're integrated into your nervous system is integrated to every facet of your life. Like your body and mind can really sense the situation in which you're in, even if it's not the like globally the situation which you're in. Like how you're placed, like you said, within your family, like things being worse at family, your nervous system can feel that strain on resources and that strain and that risk to your well being. And it's very easy to again to like just be like, well, if I could just focus on this thing will do well. But yeah, your everything in your life affects everything else in your life. It's more of like a network. It's like a web, of interactions. It's not just like, yeah, it's not like a step-by-step thing you can go through. Yeah.
How did you learn this for yourself? Because it sounds like some wisdom that you've found on your own.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Well, obviously, like trying and failing at many things.
Hell yeah, brother. Big same.
Yeah, yeah. And then, I mean, for me, like, I have a pretty deep meditation practice. So, like, I think the experience of spending more and more time paying it on retreat, and I do about 2 silent retreats a year, and the practice of paying closer attention to my experience and life, and then really having more awareness overlap with things failing is really what the key, right? So like not because not having awareness and things failing, it's very easy to construct a story that has nothing to do with what went wrong. Yeah, but
That's some strong wisdom. Honestly, I like that vocabulary a lot of being present while things are failing, because I think that like I think a lot of people's base level programming is to start disassociating when things are going poorly, because they don't want to feel that it's going badly, because that shit hurts, right? Especially if you care a lot about it. And And so being present in the process of things going poorly, even though it's really hurtful, I think that the ROI from that perspective is just like, well, I'm not going to put a number. It's like pseudo infinite, right? Because yeah, the only way that you're actually going to ever move through the thing that caused things to break is by being present with it while it's happening, and then also doing the postmortem side of it as well. That's something that it's actually really interesting though. I was having a conversation. I work with her name's Dr. Lindsay Shaw. She's the head of sports psychology for the Cleveland Guardians now, I believe. Absolute badass woman. I am so grateful to have her as my sports psychologist. But one thing we were talking about is exactly this, where I was actually going through recently. We had like a pretty intense health thing happen with my wife. Everything is okay now, but it was happening during Triton, and then right before the Super High Roller Bowl PLO, like right before, pretty much essentially two of my biggest poker sprints of the year. And so we were having a conversation about how do you effectively do this, right? Because if you saw this in the World Series this year, one of the pitchers from the Dodgers had like I believe it was a stillborn, like a really intense medical thing happen with his wife. Yeah, during the World Series, and the other team, the Blue Jays, actually were paying homage to him, which is a fantastic show of sportsmanship by them. But it it's a really intense environment when you are expected to literally be at your peak level performance, right? It's like I'm going and playing 100Ks. And that's when I have to have my systems fully dialed. And yet, the thing that allows me to do that in a lot of ways is my family and my wife, particularly. And so when she was going through this really intense medical thing, it it's like, how do you process that simultaneously? Because the best time to process actually isn't when you have to perform. It, and so we had a really, it was honestly a very enlightening conversation in a way, because the answer that we came to was not to like disassociate away from the experience that I was having, but more so to acknowledge that it's a thing that we will have to tackle at some point in time, but that today is not the day to do that. And so there still is that presence, right? I'm not ignoring what's happening. I'm consciously choosing that I have to compartmentalize it for this specific time period so that I can go and show up and like play the super high roller bowl and know that I'm executing at my best for myself, for my investors, and all of those things. Cause that to me is really important. And I enjoy, like, that's the most fun that I have playing poker, is playing like super high stakes against the best players. Right. But I do think it comes back to what we were just talking about, where the process of being able to be not self-critical but self-aware, it's even more nuanced than you just should always be present, right? And that's I think a lesson that I'm learning at this stage of my life as well, is that anytime I come to a polar viewpoint of something where it's like, because on average I do think that being present while things are hard is good, it takes away some of the nuance in specific situations where that might not be the case, right? Like having that frigid mentality.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is the reality of being human. I mean, the every function of your brain exists for a reason, right? So it's really about the time and place for it. So you can say something like disassociate, but you can, it's the same functionality. It's all relationship with that. What one people might call disassociate in one moment, we might call compartmentalizing in another. It just really depends on the appropriateness and the utility of it, and if it's what you need in that moment. Getting down to just space of like, is this what you need? Is this helpful? And learning to really sense out what is helpful in this moment is, I think, a really valuable skill.
That's the hard
And
shit. That's hard to
yeah,
do.
well, that's where viewpoints make it hard, right? You mentioned rigid views. Rigid views are what make it hard, because when you have a viewpoint that is like presence is good, and everything in your nervous system and your body and your experience is trying to tell you, we can't face this right now. That's what everything is saying. But you have this view that says presence is good. And so now you're trying to impose something. But if you just really, funny enough, there's a different kind of presence that just says, what is it that I need? And not in a fixed view that is still present, but it's not this idea of presence, right?
Yeah.
It's real presence. It's real presence. It's the experience of presence with what your body is telling you. And your body might tell you, like, we need to face this another day. And I had a teacher who used to say there's like two really important skills, and it's finding peace and it's making peace, and you have to know which is appropriate. And like sometimes finding peace means you're going through something difficult. There's times in meditation where you're going through difficult things, and really what you need is actually to draw your awareness elsewhere and to be present with something else. You're still present, but to be present with something more neutral, that is more stabilizing, that calms your nervous system, so you can come back to that experience. And then sometimes that's not an option. And it's important to have the ability to make peace in the midst of hardship, to be able to draw within you the strength to be able to make peace when you can't do that. But there is a skill of utilize and real wisdom and being able to sense out like, what does this moment really need? And it sounds like for you, what it needed was to find peace and to put something not at the forefront of your mind so that you could do what you needed to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It it's so funny. We say these words out loud. It's like, yeah, you just have to do this thing, and it it really, I think that that's why I like the word practice for meditation, because at least for me, I still think one of my biggest learning journeys at this stage of my life is like actually trusting, like deeply trusting my intuition, because it is so powerful. This is another thing that I've been specifically in my poker game, because for example, when I'm playing a pot limit Omaha tournament, for almost every situation that shows up, I know the mathematically correct answer, like in theory, right? And I even sometimes even know the node locked correct answer, where I would be deviating from theory given the person that I'm playing against. So it's like, not only do I know GTO, but I've done enough work on the game to know what's the mathematically optimal deviation, even in that moment. And because that muscle is so strong, and I know the correct answer in so many situations, it actually causes me to just like blunder at a decently high frequency, because my intuition, and when I say blunder, I don't mean blunder in the case of like mathematically blunder. Like if you're playing in a solver, those blunders, they happen. They don't come up too often. Obviously everyone makes mistakes, but I don't blunder too much in that way. But my definition of blunder in my current iteration is more like, did I make a choice that did not actually feel correct in my body? And what's really interesting is that I can't name names, I will say, but like I know for a fact that a couple of the biggest, highest winning poker players of all time, who are like very GTO oriented, have also started to make this shift in the same way as me, which I find really interesting. And obviously you don't have to do this. You can just play like GTO and crush, and that's okay. But what I've found is that some of the best players in the world are starting to, and we didn't even talk about this together. Like we chatted about it separately after having come to it at different times. But it's like, I really do think that there's something to be said about being able to not go with what the brain is doing when your brain is really strong. And that's why to me it's a practice. Like my brain is so strong that it will sometimes override my body, because I know like how many BBs I'm burning by making this play. It's like I can mathematically quantify how much I'm deviating in a specific moment. And to do that takes a lot of trust in your intuition. But my intuition is also strong. So
I think this comes down well to the what we said at the beginning, though, this difference between linear and parallel problem solving. Because I would distinguish a little bit more than just saying the brain, because I think intuition is a largely brain focused process, and we know this from neuroscience. But like we, but the left side of your brain in particular, the left hemisphere, which is this is what's interesting, the left side of your brain, which is mostly concerned with this is for right-handed people, but the which is mostly concerned with action in the world. It's mostly concerned on acting and apprehending and grabbing things and moving things. This is also why language resides mostly in the left. Oh, not mostly, almost entirely in the left hemisphere. This part of your brain is really concerned with labeling things and conceptualizing and calling things something, because that helps you act on them. And so, but that's we have taken a misunderstanding, because you even said what you know. It takes a I think time and experience to learn what it does even mean and what does it feel like, and where in your experience does knowledge actually present itself. And I think a lot of people have had this mislead that if I can think something, I know something. If I have a thought about something, or if I can clarify or have a concept about something, then I know it. But your thoughts and our concepts and our ideas are actually more about acting. They're more about doing. So the thoughts that we can have are more about how to act in the world and how to apprehend the world and how to move things and what they can be used for. It is actually your felt experience, which is actually where knowledge is contained. Because if you think about what's happening in a situation, it's this massive amount of information you're going through. The situation you're in cannot be contained within language. There's too much subtlety, too much nuance. But that's what we mean when we say have an intuitive action on something, right? It's a felt sense that is like a parallel processing solve problem, right? You have like, I have all this information feeding in, and this is the right answer. But calculations are all linear, like math are all linear. So to be able to come down and be like, well, this is probably the mathematically correct thing. That's a linear problem solving. But intuition is like this parallel processing problem that comes down. But that it's interesting because I just think that more and more people will say like I know something, but it's like if you don't have the experience of like having the felt sense of it, that is actually what is more like what it means to know something than being able to like even have the words that go with something, if that makes sense.
No, I completely agree. And I would say that it's a little bit it's easier for someone like me maybe to have an intuition, quote unquote, or to have the creative side because I do know all the math, right? It's like my brain's gonna much more eloquently come to a subconscious feeling towards something because it does have that parallel processing of having the experience. Like I've been playing poker since I was 13, so I've seen these situations millions and millions of times. Like it's such an intuitive process at this point. My wife and I, there's a very famous fantasy author. His name is Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if you're aware of who he is. He's very it's actually really fascinating reading his work because he's one of the few people that he's created essentially like a Marvel cinematic universe in the context of books. It's called the Cosmere. And so it's this, you know, and he's the only author that can execute on this because he's a freak of nature and can literally just write books on a metronome and like post his progress online. The dude's insane. If you go to any other high fantasy author, they're like, this guy is built different. Because he is like his special interest is writing, and it's beautiful, and he's so talented. But in his books, one of his books, I'm not going to give a big spoiler, but like there's essentially an idea that there are entities that are the background processing of his universes, and what they do is they all are separate. So like one of them would be like justice, one of them would be the like destruction, one of them would be preservation. And so it's not that they are emotions, they are acting forces that then have a human personification associated to them. And that's a lot of the time what it feels like. The meme between us have been when I'm making choices in poker. It's like, how many of the gods am I praying to? It's like, am I praying to the math gods? Am I praying to like the intuition gods? Am I praying to the variance gods? Because they're also very important, right? And not that we can control variance, obviously, but more so, I do think that in specific moments, and this is something when you have a conversation with a dude like Jesse Lonis, for example, like Jesse is incredibly outspoken about not making a choice if it doesn't feel good in his body. And he's incredibly talented at that. He might be like the actual best in the world at doing that in poker currently, because I've seen dude make some wild choices that don't make sense. And when he's dysregulated, it kind of goes off the rails because he doesn't have a strong enough theoretical background to back it up, right? So like if I'm dysregulated, I know that if I showed up to poker that day and I just played GTO, I'm still going to have a positive ROI. But it doesn't mean that my ceiling is going to be as high as it would normally be if I'm not like both playing well theoretically and then making these deviations. Whereas someone like Jesse, because he doesn't have the baseline of like, not that he's a bad theoretical player, but he's not like an Isaac Haxton or whatever. He hasn't done the work, and so the his baseline or his bounds are so much wider because he's only praying to a couple of the gods, if that makes sense. Like, but he's really, really, really good at it. In the same way that Ike isn't necessarily praying to the intuition gods or whatever, but he's really fucking good at theory. And so he's also going to have a really high win rate, right? But I really have been appreciating this perspective that you're describing, kind of the parallel processing, because to me it feels like weight training for outside of poker decision making as well, right? Like when my wife and I had this kind of medical scare thing happen recently, we had a lot of good data from doctors that we had to navigate. But then also there was kind of like this intuitive component of it where we were asking her, it's like, hey, we have to make this choice in a situation where we haven't slept for 48 hours because we were in a different country yesterday and now we're back in the US and it's 2 a.m. and there's a fire alarm going and you have to choose whether or not to like have surgery, right? And we have the logic from these doctors, but how, like, I actually don't like, and obviously we're going to listen to doctors because we believe in science. And the there's another component of it because it's actually a close call. Like you don't have to do the surgery right now. It's like it's possible that that's not the right choice. And so I was really grateful for poker in a lot of ways in that situation because, well, one, it was allowing me to function off of no sleep in a really high stakes environment. And that's not something that's trivial. But then also, I think that we both have the vocabulary of being able to take a step back and be like, okay, this is what the science and data says in this situation. Now let's actually like make the choice. And how do we make that choice in a high stakes situation? And I'm really grateful to poker for that because it put us down a pathway that ended up being the safest pathway for her, which we're really grateful for. But all really interesting things to me.
But it's interesting that the felt sense, because you're even saying like, which there's reasons why we get these kind of like metaphorical language, because like the experience when you say something like, "How many of the gods am I praying to?" which I love, but that really evokes this
Yeah,
imagery of parallel processing, right?
it
Where it's like,
does.
how many things am I connected to at once, and math being one of them. Because I'm not here to talk dad on theory. I play, the way you're describing the way that you play. I'm a Hold'em player, but it is very much in line with the way that I feel like I play Hold'em, and but again, it's this question of how much do you let yourself be a complete thing, and how much do you trust the part of your mind to kind of take in all the things that you care about, all the facts of your situation, all your values, all the things that are important to you. Like everything is symbolic of who you are and how you want to be. What is the most fun for you? All of it. Balance all of these things and then come up with an answer that meshes that. And when you're talking about the doctor thing, it's like, yeah, it's really important that there are just facts, but there's science, there's good studies about what is safe and whatever, but there's all of these nuanced details about the person, about the situation you're in your life and your relationship and what you guys want and desires and all of that. And I think it's something where I think poker is unique in the sense that it's been slow to understand that yes, there's a point in your learning where like conceptual frameworks and like rigid rules and the ways that you approach things is really helpful for learning. There's a like every field has that, but poker's unique in the way that it glorifies the methods at which you start getting good at something and the methods at which you become an expert at something. And in almost every industry, you take chess, you take sports, there's an understanding that like at some point you have to let the concepts of things go. You have to let the thinking of things go. They've taken like expert performers and had them think through, like golfers, had them think through how they would teach someone to golf while swinging. And their performance massively dips. But that's not true if you're new. If you're new, you might need to be thinking these things through. Like, okay, I put my hands here and like whatever, and I step through this, and this is how I do it. But at a certain point, your nervous system knows that stuff, and to think is actually a shallow ghost of the actual knowledge. To be thinking about the thing is like the shallowest possible representation of what you know. This psychologist who works on hemisphere studies, he's like the world's leading expert on the hemispheres. He wrote the book The Master and His Emissary. I can't think of his name right now. That's why I'm quoting his works to save myself, hoping it comes to my mind,
You're
but
doing
it's
great.
it's not. But anyway, but I can't think of his name right now. But he has this description of what thoughts are that I think is, or like what words are or ideas are, that is so powerful to me. And he says it's the limit case. It's the limit case, which literally means it is the most stripped down version of the thing that you're talking about that still can contain what the thing is you're talking about. And a lot of us think, or a lot of people think, that our words or our representations of things are like an enhanced version of the thing. That if only I had more language and more ways to describe this, I would be better, or more structured or more thought processes. But when you really think about, like, when I say a table, I have taken all of the subtlety and nuance of any table, all of the detail, anything out of it. I've stripped it down to its barest thing and turned it into a word so I can say it to you. And all language is this way. And so I think poker is really unique in the way that they have glorified some of these more explicit things and like what you can describe and what you can say, and taken a lot of the value out of what is implicit, what you can feel, and like the full sense of something. Um, but I think that speaks to our culture as well. But yeah.
It's lots of things in that. I agree with a lot of it. The 2 points I want to make, the last part you make about the culture, it it's very apparent specifically in like 2025 because the idea that you need theory to win is so prevalent because because it's now true, right? And so a lot of players who were, let's say, more intuitive players for a long time, or I'm using the word intuitive as like a catch-all. Obviously, there's logic
Yeah,
happening
I
too,
know what you mean. Yeah.
but those players are now starting to become archaic, because even though they are good at making choices, their fundamentals are just so bad that it crashes and burns, right? And so it makes sense that poker right now is kind of having its counterculture moment against field players, essentially, because because those people, and unfortunately a lot of those quote unquote field players, because they're getting passed by, are now starting to have, let's say, salty reg syndrome. Like and it makes sense too. Like their way of supporting themselves over a long period of time is going away, and they'd have to go back and learn new things in order to make that not true anymore. And that's a very vulnerable thing. It's hard. You're going to lash out with fear. You're going to lash out with hatred. And so there is a pretty strong counterculture in some ways against that approach, while there also being another very strong counterculture against theory, because the theory robots are scary. Like someone like Steven Chidwick scares the shit out of people, even though he's like the nicest human on the planet Earth and is so soft and is so sweet. But when you see him at a poker table, you just know he's going to eat your lunch, because he is.
Do you view him as a theory robot? Is that how you view Chidwick?
I think that he is viewed as a theory robot by other. Yeah, I think that if you were, I think if you were to say, like, he's the face of Octopi or whatever, right? Like if you think of Steven Chidwick, the dude, and to be fair, he's a fucking demon at theory. He's maybe one of the top 5 game theorists on the planet Earth, and that's not, and I know all of them. He's a monster. But dude makes choices that aren't theoretically correct in a lot of situations. He is making deviations. But with all that being said, I can see why we are having this like identity crisis in poker right now. One, also because it's under attack from a lot of, like, from industry, from rake, from legislation. It's like, it's a space where a lot of, like, outside of chess, there weren't that many people making their living off of chess, right? Whereas in poker, so many people create their livelihood from that. And so we're going to have a lot of really strong emotion when it comes to how people view themselves within the game, and then trying to create their own identity within the game. And why it also is going to make sense that in a way that what you're describing, that they're not going to be able to like create a self-classification that actually is succinct. And it actually, are you aware of Andrea Gibson? Do you know who this human is?
I would want to suggest that she works with Primed Mind, but I don't know if this is
different human. You're thinking of, you might be thinking of Sam. But Andrea Gibson is a very they just passed away, very famous poet. Was actually the first ever like rock star poet. They toured the entire U.S. as a poet. That was the first person that ever did that. Really wise human. Ended up passing of cancer.
So I was really close when I said someone who works with Primed Mind.
You did great. You did great.
I was right there.
You were right there.
I was thinking there's someone named Adrian or something. Yeah. I think it's so funny.
No.
I couldn't let the truth of who this person is you were being very kind to just like breeze past and to just let us pretend that this was like a totally understandable thing.
No.
Anyway, sorry.
And to be fair, this human is like, I steal a lot of my wisdom from my wife, who pays attention to smart people outside of poker, and so I wouldn't have known who Andrea Gibson was either without her. But a
great poet,
truly beautiful at expressing the human condition. And what's fascinating about them is that they do not have an extensive vocabulary. They like self-admittedly. So their partner is a like classically trained, I think, upper level education human who is also a poet, and lots of eloquent wording, right? Like lots of nuanced, bigger words, really, really powerful. Whereas Andrea, their poetry, one of the pieces of feedback they got from their early editors was that their poems are just the same set of words rearranged over and over and over again. But then you listen to the content of it, and it is so powerful and it is so prolific, using very little very, very little differentiation in vocabulary. And to me, that is what actually shows true mastery, right? It's like if someone is teaching me math and they have to use a bunch of words to describe shit, I don't like, not that they're not smart, but they don't quite really get it. Whereas when you listen to somebody like the best poker teachers or the best math teachers or the best anything sort of a teacher, their ability to describe incredibly complex ideas is not heavy-handed. It is concise, and it uses small words, and it uses very easy to understand ideas. And so that, to me, I think also is a big issue in poker, because poker is so fucking complex. Like, we've all chosen a game that mathematically is really hard, and then you also have like the human component of it, the emotional component of it. Like, you have to deal with variance in the way that poker is presented to us is not really just like, the human nervous system was not designed for that, right? Like obviously we were good at dealing with variance evolutionarily. For like, if you walk through the forest, a bear might be there and you'll die. But like, that's very different than having your net worth, which is directly correlated to your sense of security, because that is your ability to feed yourself, having that fluctuate constantly. Like, our nervous systems just weren't necessarily designed for that, right? And
Yeah, quick interjection on that as well. I mean, because I think one of the most stressful things for our nervous systems, along with the variance, but is the frequency and stakes of the decisions that we make. Your nervous system is not attuned to making such high stakes, such important, such critical and nuanced decisions consistently, time and time again. And then with variance as a result, and having to interpret that as a result of that. Yeah, like
yeah,
both of those facts. Yeah,
and then the
yeah,
outcome doesn't align with the decision making at a really high
yeah,
frequency, and
yeah,
that fucks
yeah,
our brains up too. And so
yeah.
it's this deeply complicated system that we've chosen to sit inside of as people. And to make that simple, to make that easy to understand, requires such a depth of understanding, not just from the theoretical perspective, but from the whole system, right? Like, you really have to have sat inside of it for many, many years to have gained the wisdom. And I do think that it's where I think the best coaches in poker do a really good job, and the worst coaches in poker are causing the most pain and suffering, because the you can be a good poker player, you can be a good theoretical coach, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to create a system for the people that you're working with that is actually executable, because it might be too complicated for them, or it might not be able to empathize with their approach to where they are at their stage of their development. And because a lot of the people who are coaches in poker are successful or have some sort of like narcissistic characteristics, which I'm not going to say that I don't. Like, that's just like, is what it is. Narcissist, like, I have a funny
Nah, who
side story on
doesn't?
that. Yeah, for sure. I'm not hitting on myself. I'm more just trying to make a commentary that when you believe you have wisdom, you have to skirt the line between confidence in yourself and humbleness that you still have more to learn. And that's a really challenging line to walk down, I would say. And a lot of the best teachers are really good at that. They know what they know, and they know what they don't know. But in poker, it's really fucking hard to do both of those things. It's really hard to know what you know, and it's really hard to know what you don't know, because of the multifaceted nature of the game itself, both from the perspective of playing it and from the perspective of existing inside of it as an ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, so I view this is interesting because when you're talking about the expertise that comes from, like, when someone is really an expert, they can explain something very simply. I know the way that this relates to the coaches who are good. I view there are many expert coaches. I'm sorry, expert players who are quite poor coaches, purely because they don't understand themselves very well. They don't even understand how they're doing the thing that they think they're doing very well. Because typically, why I think you see experts be very, we can even, I think there's an even more precise way we can talk about, like a simple way to explain things. We're basically talking about the spectrum from how abstract something is to how grounded and how tangible something is. And when something feels more grounded, the more tangible, that's why metaphors are so helpful, is because it grounds it in something somatic, something felt, something like that you can really understand in the real physical world. And there's a reason why really good experts can explain things in more grounded ways, is because their knowledge and their awareness of their knowledge is felt. It's not abstract to them. It's felt knowledge within their own experience. Like, when I talk about what it's like to make a decision, and I have awareness of what it's like to make that decision and what's actually helpful, I can feel what it's like to be torn between things. Like, we even use this metaphorical language, to be torn, right? There's like a sense of pull, and to be aware of this grounded sensation. the more abstract the language is, it is evidence that either your knowledge itself still remains in this abstract domain, or you have not self reflected to be able to be aware of the grounded way in which your knowledge is making itself known to you. And so I do think the way people communicate is a pretty good, clear indication of what it is they're actually, how much they can actually help you. One of the biggest problems in poker today is the lack of community, accountability, and people who are being vulnerable about some of the more deep personal struggles going on. I run into this all the time in my one on one coaching where people are talking about things that they haven't had an outlet for, and I'm the only one they're sharing those things with. One of the ways in which I want to help with this problem is actually creating a group coaching project where people can come together, have a sense of community, share openly with each other, and all work towards the common goal of making ourselves and our poker game better, along with pushing towards any of the other goals we have in our lives. The application for this group is open right now on my website, jaredalderman.com. If this is something you've been looking for, please apply. It is a first come, first served basis. We will only take 5 to 8 applicants. So apply now, save your spot, and I look forward to working with you.
I agree. To me, the biggest differentiating factor, and honestly, where I've probably, like, I know that my theory is good when I'm teaching people things. Like, I know I'm showing up with the good stuff, and that it's like pretty obvious. I've done the work on it. But that to me isn't actually what will make someone I'm working with successful at the highest frequency. And this actually, I learned about this recently. I'm stealing more wisdom from my wife, but she was having a conversation with her psychiatrist, and in peer-reviewed studies, the number one metric for evaluating whether or not you will have a successful therapy relationship is whether or not you like your therapist. It does not matter what school they went to. It does not matter what they specialize in. It is if you like the person that you're talking to, your actual tangible results as measured by like depression surveys and anxiety surveys, those things will improve the most if you like the person that you're working with. And from our understanding, that comes from this like deep sense of trust and vulnerability, which is so powerful to the therapeutic dynamic, because you have to be able to actually talk through the hard things in a safe environment in order to process them. And I think that for poker, that same thing is true, because even when we're learning theory from somebody, in a lot of ways, it's a very vulnerable dynamic, because you're essentially being told that this is the quote unquote right way to do something. And you have to trust that the person that is giving you that information actually knows what they're talking about. And even if the most theoretical badass in the world is telling you something, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll trust them if they don't have the capacity to make you feel as if it is something that you should trust. And so a lot of my work that I do with my clients, both in poker and a lot of it is done with my like exec coaching clients at this point, is making sure that we together build a vocabulary and a dynamic where the consent is reciprocal, where it's like we both enjoy and we want to work within this communicative dynamic. Therefore, when information is being passed in either direction, we can trust that it is being accepted for what it is, and that there is a system in place for communicating feedback. And to me, I think that if you're like a newer poker coach, that's something that I would really, really index on. And there's a ton of literature on how to do this correctly, like making sure you do nonviolent communication. There's like I could list off like 50 books on this. It's very well studied. But being able to create a dynamic with the people that you're working with in a way where it doesn't just feel like you're creating a power dynamic, because that's what a lot of coaching dynamics become. It's like I'm the person who knows, you're the person who doesn't. By having it be more of a like we're homies hanging out, and I'm teaching you some cool stuff, and you're going to probably teach me some cool stuff too, because I'm learning from you at the same time, even if it's not poker that I'm learning, whatever, right? That dynamic is going to be by far the most beneficial for the people that you're working with. And I think that poker is just really far behind in other industries when it comes to finding good teachers, because so many of our best players are, like just sharp kids who are neurodivergent and figured shit out. And so trying to teach it's really hard.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I ran a just recently. Kevin Rabichow and I run a coaching for coaches group. So we
Love
ran a
that.
course like coaching coaches,
Hell
and
yeah.
what we call what I the approach that I advocated for there was what I called client-centered coaching. And what I told people, so Carl Rogers is this psychotherapist who coined this term client-centered therapy. And he distilled, from the you're talking about from the client side, that them liking their therapist is really important. Carl Rogers ran the most extensive studies on what qualities were present in the therapist that helped improve that. And he basically boiled down client centered therapy was about three things. It was about unconditional positive regard towards your clients, empathy, being able to view things from their perspective and understand what they're going through. And the third one, which shocks a lot of people, is congruence. That they're vulnerable. That they're when they're having an experience, they're expressing it. They're not angry and bothered by something and pretending they're happy about something. From the therapist side.
Yeah. No,
And
that
so,
yeah.
yeah,
That makes sense.
I was
So
just gonna say that was our whole course was really about this. Was like, what does it mean that in my opinion, if those things are present in any what I would call helpful relationship, any relationship where one person's trying to help another person, I think this is true in romantic relationships or anything. On average, it really empowers people to navigate their own space and find their own answers. And like you said, be vulnerable, be honest. One of the main reasons that people don't understand the things getting in their way is because it is too painful for them to face that, and because they believe it means something judgmental about them. If as a coach you can present the energy to somebody that like unconditional positive regard, that I'm going to regard you well no matter what comes out of this, no matter what you say, no matter how you act, I'm going to regard you well. It really gives people the strength for themselves to bring things out that they might have judged in themselves before that. And this is certainly true in theory coaching. I've definitely experienced this in coaching poker strategy as much as I have in coaching mental game and performance.
I really love that, the conciseness of that description, because that's essentially it. And I would even take it a step further and say that if you have the capacity to create, and I'm going to use this word, it's so funny because this word is a very loaded word now, which is weird to me, but to create a safe environment, right? Like people see safety as like, snowflakes needing safety in order to exist in the world. And, you can't create a fully safe world. We live it, we're monkeys that are like clicking buttons and figuring shit out. So obviously our systems are going to be chaotic. But if you can create an environment where both people, both the coach and the client, or the coach and the group, feel safe existing as who they are as individuals, then it will have the highest impact on the entire system, essentially. And another way of describing that, even relative to our previous conversation, is like, how do you keep nervous systems more dialed down, right? Because what ends up happening with a lot of my clients is, by the second or third lesson, we end up having to have a conversation about like trauma, because they're like, yeah, this thing is happening and I keep having this response pattern. And then my question is, okay, well, where does that come from? And then my next thing is, okay, well, I'm now going to refer you out to a therapist who can do this trauma work with you, because I'm not a licensed therapist who can do trauma work. But this is a thing that is recurring because you have had a experience earlier in your life around it. Like, so many people have huge issues with, once they start losing a little bit, they lose a lot more. Or once they were losing a little bit and then they win some back and then they lose a little bit more, it causes these cascades. And at such a high frequency, especially in men, this is a trauma-based response because of like false summits and the way that our society is designed, like resource allocation. But it's hard to use trauma, not capital T, but like even lowercase t trauma, which means that it didn't have to be a like big event that happened to you. It could literally just have been that like society programmed this into you for whatever 20 years, and now you're still dealing with it, right? And so I think that it becomes really vulnerable, and that's where like the safety word comes back to, because you have to kind of do this work. You don't have to do this work. Let me rephrase that. No, you don't have to do any work. You can get B- results from a coaching interaction and still have it feel positive to you and still make your poker game better or your business better. And that'll be it. But if you're trying to get what most people are actually looking for in coaching or in getting any sort of therapy, which means like a deep, and I'm not going to say most people, but I think that a lot of people want to have a transformation because there is a thing that they don't like about where they currently are and they want that thing to change, right? But in order for that to happen, it's usually not the thing that you're trying to get changed that actually needs to change. It's like a systemic infrastructure thing that you have to evaluate. And then once you can do that, you can start building on top of it again. And and so it ends up being that you for me with my clients, there needs to be this like profoundly soft environment while also, but within that soft environment, I'm still going to call you out on bullshit. Like, we're still going to have like real talk conversations about things that aren't going well. I'm not going to coddle you. I'm going to just create an environment that is safe for those dialogues to happen, and for both of us to be able to show up as our authentic selves to get that efficient transfer of information back and forth.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I can tell that you just have done a ton of you have a ton of experience in coaching because like all it just this all just resonates as so true. I mean, yeah, safe is a rough word for the, things you were saying because like I think it brings up this idea of, overly concerned with it because but like you said, in my experience, it also has to be a confidence inducing environment, which is like I believe you can handle me being honest with you, you know. And yeah, the words that came to mind as you were describing instead of safe, I'm curious if you agree, but it's like regulated, like a regulated environment. Yeah, right. Like one that like you can get upset, you can get angry and trust that I'm not going to lose my shit at you because you said something that upset me or something like that. Or like, I can keep it together and be on and we can so much of the coaching this is why it's funny because like, I think a lot of people undermine or devalue coaching because they're like, there's so much information out there. Why do you need a coach? But so much of what is beneficial in the coaching is the relationship. It's not even the exchange of information. It's the relationship itself. It's the relational environment that can help you. You can absorb someone's felt sense towards something through the course of a relationship. And not you can do that. You can also like the relationship itself can change the way you feel about yourself. If you have an encouraging coach who supports you, you can absorb their good regard towards you, towards yourself, and you can start feeling better about yourself as a player. And it's just like it's such a powerful environment, and it's really a shame to see people devalue it because the relationship is such an intangible thing. It's something that it's tangible in the way that you feel it, but it's intangible in the sense that you can't really point to it in the world. But that is something which I think if you're a coach and I face this a lot though myself because there are coaches who just try to like lecture their students when they show up and just like spew things at them. But there's something similarly vulnerable about showing up as a coach and being like, I'm going to help you. And what that naturally evokes in people is what they believe is valuable in them, like what they have learned to condition as like, what is the valuable thing in me that I can actually transfer to you? And I think a lot of coaches who I think are probably not the best coaches, but they have deeply clung onto this idea that like what is the only thing that is valuable about me are the things that I know. And so since you're here paying me for it, that's what I'm going to give you, you know?
I like the last thing you just said, which is, and to be fair, those things probably are important things, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
they are. Yeah.
and but it makes sense that the communication will be a little more harsh or without as much reciprocation because it is so attached to their core identity. It's like, this is the thing that made me good, therefore I have to give it to you.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes
But
back
the
to
sense of
yeah,
value really sorry,
yeah.
I just want to clarify the sense of value really matters here because what I've told people, and I've worked with people doing startups and stuff, and I've talked about how important it is to have like this inherent sense of value that isn't based on anything you do. Because, so like depending on like, let's say I told somebody I did this exercise with people in the coaching group. I said, okay, I just sat you down in front of somebody and I said, this guy paid $2,000 for this hour with you, give them value. What would naturally come out of any person is the things in them they believe are valuable. And they would hide the things that they do not think are valuable. And the greater your inherent sense of self-worth, the greater just that me being here is valuable, the greater you can feel that. And that like, I actually don't need to do anything for this to be really worth your time. Just me being here is worth it. The easy, and I found this in myself, the easier it is I've had sessions with clients where we sit 10 minutes in silence because it's what they need. And there's a lot of coaches I think would be really stressed about that because of their attachment to this sense of what it is in them that is valuable, like what is worth something. And I think that's why you see this like aggressive pushing. It is actually an act of they are trying to deliver something valuable to their clients. They are trying to give them something. It's their self view that says this is the only thing in me that's worth something. So this is the only thing I can give you. And that to me is actually really tragic, you know.
No, this is a helpful conversation for me because I think about a lot of this stuff personally, but it's nice to have conversations about it outwardly with people who are also deep in the lab. Um, I think that honestly, one of the biggest iterations I had in my coach, because I've been a teacher, I think, since I had my first client when I was 11. I I was a math teacher. So I tutored, I was in sixth grade and I was like doing eighth grade math. And there was like a other girl that I hung out with and we just hung out after school 2 days a week and I helped her with her math homework. And we did that. Like, and I got paid for it too. So I've
Written in the
literally,
stars.
yeah, I literally have been teaching since I was 11 years old. And for a lot of it, for a lot of my earlier iterations of teaching, I think it was more describing what you're talking about now, where it's, I'm good at math. I'm going to make you good at math. I'm going to help you think about math. And then, I did the whole SAT teaching or whatever. And then I went into tech. And even when I was working in tech, my job was to essentially to be a teacher because I was the person who understood the models. And then there were salespeople and someone had to teach, like how to create the connection for those. And that was my job in tech for a lot of it as well. And what I've learned in my, let's say, more evolved version, not that I am fully evolved, but we're getting there. And my more evolved version of being a teacher, let's say, because I wouldn't even say a coach, I'd say like a human who tries to teach, is that you have to really have your shit together in order to do so. And I will cancel on clients on days where I don't have my shit together. I will be like, yo, like I can't show up for you today because I'm dysregulated. And then on some days I will try to, like, if I'm like slightly dysregulated, I'll prep in the same way that I'm going to a Triton. It's like, I'll go do a cold plunge in a sauna before I have a call with the client, be like, so that I can show up for them in the same way. And we're gonna get a little into the weeds here. I did an ayahuasca ceremony. I think it was 3 years ago at this point, maybe 4 years ago. 4 years ago at this point. And I'm not going to go into like all the details of that, but essentially it was an experience where there was 25 people in a room, all of whom were having one of the most intense experiences of their entire life. Not exaggerating. There was so much like deep processing happening in this space. And the shaman who was putting together this ayahuasca thing was such an absolute badass. You could feel how wise this human was there was no words being said. They were just sat in the middle of this room, in the middle of 25 people, all having the most intense experience of their entire life, myself included. I was deep in it. I was having some real stuff go down. And they were just playing music and sitting in the center of this space and holding the space for all these people. And you could feel that this was not just because they were like a human who was given this gift. It's because they had done so much work on who they were and how to do the thing that they are doing, that space was able to be held. They could literally allow for all the chaos to be happening around them and then have it flow through them and then get softened as it was flowing through them. And that we're getting into like the non whatever, we're getting far out here, but the moral of this story was that I could feel the power and the wisdom of this person, not because of who they were in like the I've achieved these things, but because of the work that they've done on themselves. And that is what gave them the ability to hold the space that they were holding. And that really shifted my perspective on the work that I had to do as a person myself in order to show up effectively for my clients, because I don't know what they will need, right? I don't know what they'll need in certain time, but I know that if I have worked on myself enough, and I think I have like 7 or 6 different coaches myself, not exaggerating. I have like a sports psychologist. I have 2 separate therapists, one for me, one for my partner, breathwork meditation coach, like a hypno person, physical therapist. Like I literally so much of the money that I make, I spend on myself and my family and my friends in other people who are wise helping us with their gift. And by doing that, I think I'm allowing myself to become a person that has the wisdom to hold space for the people that come to me looking for that help. And that doesn't necessarily even mean me coaching them directly. It means me building a company where if you come to me looking for one thing, I now have coaches under me who I have trained who can help you at your part of the journey. Because like not everyone could afford me, and that sucks. But I don't have enough time in the day, so I can't hit everyone, but I want to help as many people as possible. So how do I build products and how do I build systems where people who need help, whether it be poker, I get a lot of like non-poker people that I have to end up referring out to. Like, I have a network of therapists that I send people to at this point, right? It really comes down to, at least from my perspective, having done the work on your own so that you can then have the wisdom to hold the space that your clients need wherever they show up. And I love that because it makes me be the best
Yeah.
version of myself too.
Can can I ask something? It's not personal, but it may be a little. I'm curious. I guess I'm just gonna ask. I'm curious. Why do you refer people out to therapists? Why don't you handle? Because in my experience, the all the skills you're talking about is really all that is required to help somebody have a therapeutic experience in relationship to their trials or trauma or their whatever thing or
That's a fantastic question, and I've had this conversation with my therapist multiple times. I think that for most of the time, I refer people out is for trauma specific work, and what I mean by that is I mean that they've had an experience in their life that is deeply rooted in their current self view, and doing that digging, I think, can be more beneficial to do with one person where that's like the thing that you're doing with them, right? And so it's like when you come to me, like we're working on your entire system. Like we're working on your poker game, we're working on your family life, we're working on your business, we're combining all the, like, I have clients that literally I do all three of those things with. They are entrepreneurs who also play in private games, who also have a complex family life, and we're working on all those things together. And for lack of better terminology, I'm their therapist for those things. But I do think that there's something being said, and this isn't for all therapists. I'm pretty strict in who I refer people out to because I think that a lot of therapists are medium because our teaching systems for building good therapists, like the incentives aren't there. They don't get paid enough money, so you don't get a lot of the smartest people for it, and that sucks.
yeah, it's just like any job.
Yeah,
80% of people are terrible at it.
yeah, and that's and that
Yeah.
sucks. For our mental, like, we're having a fucking mental health crisis across the world right now because our systems are getting fucked by the oligarchy, and so it's like shit's hard for people, and I wish it wasn't that way. And I do think that having somebody who specifically has done trauma work repeatedly with many different clients, they're going to do a better job than me. And so I don't want to do that work with somebody when I know that they will get better help from somebody else because they're more trained in that thing. I would rather help them with the stuff that I know that I have deep wisdom in, and then refer them out to people who have deep wisdom in that thing. That feels safer to me. And like I'm doing, and also it'll be cheaper too, usually. It's like instead of doing that work with me and having to pay my hourly, pay someone a fraction of that hourly, right? And do that work with them. And they're going to do a better job than me anyways. Like, my job's not to talk to my clients as much as possible. My job's to help them. And for a lot of my clients, I try to like phase myself out over time. Obviously, specifically when it comes to the poker stuff, I usually stay in there because my team has built some cool stuff, and we make our clients a lot of money from that perspective. But I do think that if I have the ability to build a better system for the people that I'm working with and I'm not a part of it, that's a win to me, honestly.
Yeah. So it seems like systems is a big part of the work that you do with people. Is that what that like I've just used this word a lot, like which systems are important to achieve anything. Like for most people, there's a system level problem when if something's not working. So
So a lot of the work that I do with my clients is systemic based, as I said, like either for neurotypical or neurodivergent clients that I work with. But I'd say that what ends up happening for my, like, let's say that you're one of my like key buyer profiles, like a client archetype that I have, is, as I said, you're an entrepreneur who has seen me through poker stuff. You also play some poker. You're maybe like Series A, Series B, or you have like a blue collar thing that makes good money, but it's scaling too quickly and you don't know how to approach that problem. Or it was scaling quickly and now it's not scaling anymore and you don't know how to approach that problem, right? There's like some problems that you're trying to work on. What ends up happening in those situations at a very high frequency is that you've just been raw dogging it because you're so good at just pushing through that it it got you this far, but now because you're only an individual human, everything is starting to break down essentially. And so a lot of what I end up doing, my first couple sessions with clients will be an operational audit for their business, and then essentially an operational audit for their life, where we just kind of talk through what they're doing day to day, what their systems look like, who works for them, the how are the approaches that you have starting to fall short, and then introduce different tools. For example, like I get a lot of the work that I do is teaching people how to like hire an executive assistant, and then teaching them how to use that executive assistant so that they're not just paying someone to do nothing, right? It's like once you learn how to offload some of the tasks, especially if you have ADHD, because like for me, when I really started to get big strides in my business is when I hired my current executive assistant, and then we built systems so that I could brain dump to them so that I don't have to think about things in the background. So now I can just focus on tasks that are really important, and then they work on all the other stuff in the background because I trust them. And then we come back together and have conversations about that. Teaching someone how to do that is essentially like building a system for them and teaching them how to use it, right? And for a lot of founders, that becomes like the most important thing, literally, because now that thing, that's like you literally just forgot that it was your anniversary with your wife, not because you're a dick, but because you have so much stuff going on in the back of your head that you don't know how to offload it, right? And so when I say building systems, a lot of it is literally like just looking at the infrastructure of what your day is, literally breaking that down to its component pieces and saying, how can we be more efficient from this, from the perspective of you as an operator, but then also just you as a human, and how can we make your days feel better, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I think systems is like that is it's a thing that I think it's very obvious, like where people can end up having people have a consistent friction point that shows up in their life or in their business or, something. And it's like, why does this thing keep showing up? And it's like, well, you have systems in place that manufacture this
Yeah.
thing showing up
Yep.
consistently in your life.
Exactly.
Right. Like,
Exactly.
yeah. And I think it can be pretty, once people, I think, have this kind of like, realization. So people have this tendency to just think shit is magic. I don't know where this comes from, but like they do. They just like they go through their lives and they just think like shit's magic, like it just happens. I don't know where they get this idea, but then they just yeah, they when things aren't working, they thought what was making it work was magic, and they're convinced that what's not making it work is magic. And it's pretty amazing. That's like the thing that I tell people all the time. Like, just like anything you want to achieve isn't magic. Like, it's just there are things you can just do, and if you do those things, and you're gonna feel better, you're gonna be happier, and yeah, no, we live in a lawful universe. Everything is governed by laws, so there are ways to get to anything.
I think that I have more empathy for the people who think things are magic crowd now than I did in the past. Because in the past, I think that, my brain good at building systems, my brain good at solving problems. Why, do same thing, right? And my current iteration, I think, is a little more, or the current iteration of my viewpoint, I think, is more nuanced in that you have to recognize what the incentives are for our education system currently, and it is not systemic based. It is not build build a system for you to learn and then also be malleable and then also interact with different people to get new information. A lot of it is like learn this thing, move on, or your phone now solves this for you. You ask it a question, it solves answer, right? And and so I think that our capacity to critically evaluate our personal life infrastructure is just plummeting super hard because we already didn't really have it before our tools made us not need to do it. And now our tools have made us not need to do it. And so there's not even any reinforcement learning happening anymore. And
People are using ChatGPT on dating apps, right? Like I'm dating, so like I've
you found the
w-
that's awesome.
but like I'll be having like a fairly personal conversation, and then I will see some dead giveaway signs that this is ChatGPT. It's like it's so demoralizing. It's like I get it. Like, I have the empathy side. I frame it as demoralizing because I do understand why people would do that.
That's sad.
And to be
That's
fair,
sad though. I would be sad boy
yeah,
also.
it
Like,
is.
like
It
I liked you.
is.
Why are
It
you giving
is.
me a computer to talk to me? Like this isn't fun.
I'm gonna give you the full context to this, not on the podcast, but
Okay, I'm
it was
down.
sadder than you think. It was but
I kind of, I don't know. Maybe you should put it on. No, don't. I'm not going to pressure you.
No,
But like,
I can't. I
yeah,
can't. I can't.
yeah.
You'll see. Well, I'll explain. I'll explain. I'm pretty open, but I'll explain after. But uh, yeah. But no, this is a really strong point, though. The education system is something I had not considered. It had something that I grew up with such deep resentment towards the education system. I had never considered how like that might be. Like to me, the education system was always obviously horrible, even when I was like in fourth grade. Like I was like, this is awful. Like this doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's a strong point.
But the thing is, you as a human had the capacity to see that it was awful, and so you weren't buying in. So you were doing your own shit, right? Like you're like, all right, this sucks. How do I supplement it? And then you go outside of it and learn. I wouldn't say that that's the modus operandi for a lot of individuals. And like yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was willing to see it were probably for very sad reasons too. I did not trust authority because I never trusted my parents. And so like if I had parents I never trusted, like it's the sad thing, right? It's a good sign when you just trust the systems that are given to you. Like that's a sign of reasonable emotional health, but it's really sad when they let you down, you know? And I think a lot of people are slowly becoming disillusioned with the ways things they trusted let them down, and it's wreaking havoc in our culture.
I completely agree. Like I was pretty I honestly binked really hard when it came to my education system. Like I from the time I was in 6th to 8th grade, I was in a like accelerated robotics academy where it was taught by like an ex JPL physicist who also had emotional maturity. So dude, I was ahead in math for like by 5 years from the time I was in middle school until I got to college. It hurt me in high school because I was a freshman in senior level classes, and I decided going to a Catholic school as a Jewish kid was smart. Let me rephrase, it was fucking dumb. But so it's like the bullying ramped up pretty hard pretty quickly because my brain and my physical body were not aligned, and then that's going to create a lot of bullyable traits, even though no one should get bullied. Like it makes sense in retrospect why that happened. But I do think that and then obviously like that creates a trauma response, and then I also was playing poker already at that point, so I just stopped going to school essentially and was playing poker, but did well enough in school that it didn't matter. The it, it it's really it's honestly why I have a very strong, what's the word, there's competing forces for the education work that I do in poker, because I think that I really want to help as many people as possible. And that's honestly why I do podcasts like this, is because it allows me to give information that people usually pay me a lot of money for free. It's like I want this wisdom to be disseminated because it's real shit. And that's not me saying that like I'm holier than thou, because obviously I'm a fallible human who still has many worldviews that probably need to be iterated on. And I do think that I've paid enough really fucking smart people to teach me shit, and I've put myself in enough vulnerable situations that there is wisdom here that would be really powerful for people to learn, specifically in poker, because poker is a collectively traumatized space. It's what you have, and it's like there's a lot of neurodivergent people who found a lot of other nerds they wanted to hang out with and could try to make money from, right? Or even not. Like a lot of the like Kerry Cass's new favorite thing is telling everyone that he's autistic, and that he literally built the Poker Go studio to hang out with his autistic friends. Like it's he's like he literally is saying this out loud. But and that's why poker is beautiful. It's beautiful in that way, but it also collectively has so much gunk in it because of the competing personalities and because of the baseline things that were taught to a lot of the more famous poker players when they were coming up, like the ship at Halabala generations, like make money, girls, yada yada, like all this stuff. So there's so much like, and then obviously like in gambling there's a bunch of like gunky toxic shit too. And so you kind of get this ecosystem of people that want a breath of fresh air from society because they found a culture and a community that is also not plugged into the matrix, but it's just not a place where there's a lot of good content to digest. There's a lot of dopamine fun content to digest, like high stakes poker and shit like that, but I wouldn't say that there's a lot of like healthy content to digest outside. That's why someone like Galfond is so cool too. He was like the first dude that really did it, and I always have like, I'm grateful to that. Like I could say that Phil is we're not close, but like I could say that Phil is a friend of mine because he did so much to me and he's done so much for poker in general by putting out this idea that you can be a good human and do well in this space. And I struggle with doing that at scale while also being able to like hit what the people need. Like, cause you have to give the people what they want in order to give them what they need. Cause they're not going to, like, a lot of people come to me for poker lessons and we end up doing their trauma work. Right. But it's hard. It's really hard in a space like poker, especially as you said, people, I've gotten so much backlash I think I was maybe one of the first people that got like intense public backlash for how much I was charging for coaching. I came back from the burn one time and there was a thread on Twitter that was every single person who's ever hated me talking mad shit for a week straight about how I charge too much, how I suck at poker, how I'm a charlatan. There's like, it was really intense. Like I had to like see it sucked. It was super shitty. And I've had dudes like kind of apologize to me for it, but like even so, a lot of those same dudes will just come up to me and talk as if nothing bad ever happened. They just like started a dumpster fire on the internet. And it's really vulnerable to then continue to be like, yeah, no, I'm expensive. You're right. I charge this much money. And it's easy to do that more so now than that was like 4 years ago because, I've made millions of dollars playing poker, yada, yada, yada. That was before like I started playing Tritons and shit. But that was right before. So it's not like my theory has gotten much better. I was essentially the same poker human then. I just hadn't had the results yet. And then the results came 6 months later. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, of course you can fucking charge whatever you want. And it's a really intense thing to be a coach in a space where a lot of people are charging money that isn't justified. And then to say, I actually am justified in charging this. And it's nice because the market has actually reflected that I'm worth what I charge because I have a fully functioning coaching business. It's like, I'm not to say that I'm, that it couldn't get better, but I'm pretty happy with where it is right now. But with that being said, I do think that there is a collective negative viewpoint on coaching in our space, particularly because there have been so many bad actors that have charged too much money and have essentially snake oil salesmen people into giving it away. And so I'm appreciative.
I mean, that equally falls on the people who are buying it though as well. I mean, I just want to say, like, good on you for like honestly sticking to your guns and putting the price out there that you feel like you're worth. Like that's your right, and that's something you should do. And I think it's a completely unfair thing to criticize anybody for, But
I had to learn that lesson at that time, right? Because that was as I said, I was going through that transition. Maybe this is pre-COVID, right? So it's 5 or 6 years ago. It's really when I was coming into my own as who I am today, and I'm grateful for it in that way because it forced me to be like, no, fuck y'all. Like, you're right. I'm expensive. Deal with it. Like that it is what it is. But I also try to have empathy for the other side of it because I think it does come from one, bad actors, and then two, a lack of understanding of what it means to actually have a high level coaching engagement with somebody. It's like there's a reason that every single like tech CEO billionaire that you have has a fucking team of coaches too. It's like it's a very standard practice that the highest performers surround themselves with people who charge them a lot of money to teach them the shit that they spent their entire life learning. Like, it just makes sense, at least to me.
yeah, definitely. I think it does. I think there's a lot more that can be said about that. Unfortunately, I do have a meeting in 6 minutes, so we got to wrap this up. But yeah, I think it's a good place to leave it anyway. But no, I mean, the one thing I do want to say is like I really appreciate the idea too that like poker. I've realized definitely I've come to accept that they are my people. Like the poker people are my people. I feel a lot of kinship with them, and I'm also I'm pretty committed to wanting to put better content out there and things that are like more wholesome for the poker community at large. But
This podcast is like, I'm grateful to be on. This is a fantastic conversation because it's stuff that is very near and dear to my heart, but I don't want to just like spew out in a non-held space because it's just going to sound like I'm preaching from a soapbox without the context.
no, I appreciate you being here, man. It was great talking to you. Hopefully we'll have you back again in the future. Before you go, plug anything you wish. This is your plug time.
My plug. I think thankfully this whole podcast has probably been my plug, but I The one thing that I'm really focusing on for 2026 is continuing to build out my executive coaching product offering. And so if you're somebody who is either in poker or outside of poker, like series, I tend to work mostly with like Series A, Series B, not usually seed because that's a little early on, but founders. We really focus on building life infrastructure so that not only are you successful in your business, but that your days start to feel good again. And I don't think that that's something that we should take for granted. So if that's something that you're interested in, or if, the general, you play high stakes PLO and want someone to help you make a lot of money, I can do that for you too.
Awesome. And where can people find you?
DylanWeisman.com. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy. All right. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Thanks, Jared. Appreciate you for having me.